Hi, and you're very welcome to the Women's National League show. We just lost Aaron as he popped in there. Of course, my name is Breifne Earley, and you're here. Very welcome to finalwhistle.ie. The joys of being live on a broadcast. Aaron just dropped out there, but he is back with us now. Thank you. Thanks to the wonders of modern technology. Aaron, you seem like you'd abandoned us for a second, but you're here.
Do you know what? I'm using the mobile phone today for something different, just due to work stuff. And I was like to myself, if I don't put this on airplane mode, somebody's going to text or somebody's going to ping or something. So I was like, I'll just put it on airplane mode really quickly. But I am back. I'm ready to rock for another episode.
And then you managed to disconnect yourself in the process. Listen, it's been a whirlwind week for a lot of the teams in the league. I know we anticipated a big clash down in Wexford. We weren't disappointed with 6 goals to look at. Some real big, great finishes from some of the players on show in that game. Some big talking points coming out of that as well. Maybe in terms of discipline and in terms of where refereeing is in the league. We might touch on that later on, but let's just get stuck into that game, because I think that for me was probably one of the best contests of the week. It was nip and tuck. Both teams had their opportunities. Both teams held the lead at different points in the game. A draw probably not good enough for either manager, though.
No, especially what happened in the afternoon, which we'll speak about later on with Shelbourne result. But to me, the biggest thing is Breifne, is that Peamount's character has been questioned in recent weeks. And I think, to be fair to them, last weekend is where they probably showed an awful lot of character. They've had to fall back, they had to fight back, they had to show something maybe they haven't showed in a couple of weeks. James made a little bit of a change to the system as well. And the problem is, and I think they've realised where their vulnerabilities are at. There's no point in us continuing to highlight them. I think they know that now. But, in terms of them, you could see even in the likes of the Wexford game, they nearly fancied themselves to go back to Peamount of all and just be like, listen, if you're going to score us, we'll back ourselves to outscore you. Things they've been doing in previous years and stuff like that. To me, it was one of the better games this season. It was an open and frantic affair at times. And I think if you're one of the lucky people who actually made the trip to Clarke Park on Saturday evening, you had a great day out. Ellen Lloyd, nine league goals already this season. Massive tally considering the amount she scored last season. Some probably, looking at Saturdays, one or two maybe Peamount will think that was, easily could have been defended, and things could have been slightly different from them. But from a Wexford point of view, they haven't beaten Peamount or Shelbourne this year in the league. This is the first draw they've got. They had a bad loss against Peamount in PRL Park, and then obviously they lost against Shelbourne. So for Wexford, it's still 1 point out of the first 3 games against the side who finished in the top 2 last year. And I think for Stephen Quinn, so they'll be massively disappointed with that. I do have something that I want to throw out there to you, Breifne, and I don't know how realistic it is.
You're going to get me in trouble here now, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay, good.
So we don't know what the story is with Rihanna Jarrett. We don't know whether she has the time left in England. She doesn't, whether she's going to come home. But if Wexford Youths could somehow convince her to come home, and surely the FAI could put her up in some development officer's job or something, because she's a wealth of knowledge in terms of coaching ability as well as playing. If Wexford Youths could somehow convince the likes of someone like a Rihanna Jarrett to come home, I think it's probably the key cog that they're missing at the moment. Someone to put the ball in someone else, bar the likes of Ellen and Kylie. The goals come up from midfield to put the ball in the net.
Well, speaking of goals from Wexford, 3 of them at the weekend. Ellen, a good bit of hustle from her to create her own chance and find the ball in the back of the net for the first Wexford goal. But for me, the goal of the day was probably Kylie Murphy's effort to put Wexford in the lead late on. Some finish, some through ball through as well to find her in acres of space. She could pick her spot, put it past Avery Burke and go.
Yeah, it was a lovely finish from Kylie Murphy. The thing about Kylie Murphy is she's one of these players that she's like a fine wine. She's getting older and older every year, but she's getting better and better every year. She's just adding something extra to her game. They moved her up top last year, and she hasn't let them down. She scored goals. And Saturdays is an example of just the sheer quality that she does have. The one thing we will say, and it's probably something for a podcast a different day, is the fact she's never got an Ireland cap. It's the most disappointing thing for me. She's one of a few who had never got that over at that line, but tons of ability, probably the heartbeat of Wexford Youths, and you can see anytime she doesn't play how much they miss her.
Absolutely, no, and there's plenty of players in that category as well who've been overlooked for international honours over the years. I've heard you mention her name specifically before, I think on this show, not that long ago, with the other host, previous host on the podcast. In terms of, I suppose, the disappointing thing for me was how the game ended. It was 3-3. both teams, I think, kind of knew subconsciously that it wasn't quite what they had looked for that day, and there's been a disappointment on both sides. We saw a red card for Stephanie Roach for something obviously she said within earshot of the referee, and the referee didn't like it, showed her the line. But for me, the bigger, I don't know what she said, so I can't comment on what was said, but there was a visible coming together between herself and Kylie Murphy just before that, where Stephanie looked like she had maybe a little tap on the ankle. She obviously retaliated verbally and saw red for that. That's disappointing from I suppose a player point of view, but I think from things get said in the heat of the moment all the time. Was there enough in there for a red card at that stage of the game, in a game that was just petering out? Not for me. I think that's kind of a yellow card or a calm word in their ear, and it goes away. For me, the horror one was a couple of minutes later. Ellen Malloy went in for a challenge with Niamh Reid Burke, and Niamh Reid Burke got catapulted into the sky. How that wasn't a red card for me, I don't know. Ellen brings so much positivity to the game, to the league, and to the club. It was just disappointing to see that player. I know she's competitive; she wants to win every ball, but it just seemed to go. I don't know how it was a yellow card she got, and for the situation where Niamh Reid Burke to get a yellow card for her reaction to it as well, it just seemed a bit crazy at the end.
For me, sometimes we see, even with the likes of Niamh Reid Burke's reaction, sometimes we see officials just sort of saying in the end, listen, I'll give you a yellow as well. That'll kill it. But you're right. Sometimes we're seeing these sort of tackles. There was a couple last year where you're looking and you're sort of thinking, okay, you're lucky here. Like, even we'll talk about the Shelbourne game. There was a chance where Kate Mooney was through on goal, and only for the offside flag, it probably saved Shelbourne a penalty, and potentially the referee having to make a decision for a tackle from Jessie Stapleton. And to me, it's tough when it comes to officiating, because I've had a go with officials before. I've had a pop at officials for certain things. Like, it's tough. The problem is, a lot of these officials, they referee the same sort of games over and over, and you don't want to say that they've got a bias or they've got something against it, because that wouldn't be fair. But maybe there's a subconscious, unconscious bias, where sometimes decisions go. Then they know what players would give the blip, or what players would say something. But like, the interesting thing on refereeing for me is, it's like, sometimes you see referees coming up, and maybe they're on the League of Ireland panel. They're doing the League of Ireland game one week, and then they're doing the National League game the next week. I don't mind that. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, sometimes you get maybe a junior referee will pop up out of nowhere you've never seen before. I'd be interested to maybe talk to one of the match referee observers and see what they look for when they're looking at these sort of games, because the biggest thing is social media is a joint. Everybody talks about refereeing decisions and what happens. It's always the talk about it. And like, the one I can't get my head, it's not necessarily a referee, she's not refereeing as such as much as, but I can't get my head around the fact that Michelle O'Neill referee is a lineswoman in Champions League games and stuff like that. But yeah, she only seems to do the lineswoman for the Women's National League. Like, there's the UEFA qualified referee, FIFA qualified referee, done World Cups. Yeah, she's only on the line. I've seen times where she's been brought up to Dublin and for a game where you could easily have Dublin referees, and sometimes I just think the refereeing, it's a little bit of a, who's club, and sometimes they get the big decisions right, sometimes they don't. But in terms of the weekend, Steph's red card could come back to bite Peamount, considering it's now going to be potentially a 3-game ban, and could miss some big games.
Well, that's the thing for me, is that you have two similar situations. One is a physical entanglement, one is a verbal entanglement. One could put somebody in a hospital, one might hurt somebody's feelings. And I'm not saying it's either is worse or less bad than the other, but ultimately, one player is going to face is going to get a definite suspension for at least 1 game, possibly 2 or 3, and the other is available for selection next week. And I just don't think it's fair. And my concern would be, and I'm not saying this is nothing to any specific referee or any specific incident really in the league. I was in the Showgrounds on Saturday, and I watched a linesman give virtually every single offside decision that was even close to borderline towards Sligo Rovers in the first half and against Cork in the second half. And the worst thing is, I'm not going to name the linesman, but every single person who's been to a game in the Showgrounds in the last couple of years knows exactly who I'm talking about because of that. And I guarantee you there's no Sligo Rovers fan who doesn't have a good idea of who I'm chatting about, just by detail on that kind of an example. And I find that the Women's National League is almost disrespected a little bit by the FAI in terms of who is appointed to these games. And like you said, with Michelle O'Neill on the line, it's like she's there to shepherd weaker referees into the system. And I don't think a national top-level elite league is the place for that. Put it in the under-17s, under-19s by all means, but the best referees available on the day should be refereeing those games. And I know it's done to save money or save time or save costs, but we have to get away from this thing where it's someone from that town specifically is doing the line in a game. And it happens in every ground. It's not one incident or one club. But like, we need to raise the standard, and we can't expect the players to raise the standard if the refereeing doesn't match it.
Like, for me, the simple to even things like, you know, the way the FAI send out a Premier Division and First Division referees list every week to the media, to send out the fourth officials, to send out everything. We don't even get simple things like that for the National League. And you sort of know by going to certain grounds, it's going to be a number of one or two people who are going to referee the game here. And, you know, whether they have a good or a bad game, it's sort of, it should always be a case that, like, you look at in the Premier Division, Neil Doyle getting, say, both Rovers. Neil Doyle then may do assistant referee in Sligo against Derry, or First Division, you know, and it's a case that you're not getting the same referee. And you're right. I just think, for me, I don't care if you're a female or you're male, as long as you're the best person to do that job on that day. Great, we want to see that there. And I think realistically, you know, like, I've had many conversations, and I'm going to name the referee because I've had conversations with her.
Please don't.
Not getting in trouble. Not getting in trouble or anything. But, like, I've had many conversations where I won't name her. But I've had many conversations with her where, you know, I've asked, and how come you done this? How come you done, just for my own clarity? And she's just broke it down into segments. This is why I've done this. This is what I see. And, you know, when you see referees doing that, even when you're talking to the likes of ourselves after the games, and then they're doing it when they're talking to, say, players during the game. That's the biggest thing. I think the biggest thing for me is a referee should be communicating why they're making such decision to a player, because then the player understands it. Whereas you see too many referees that just go away, you know, I'm not speaking, go away. And I think there needs to be that sort of communication between them, because that's how you bridge the gap. So players will understand why you've made that decision, and then, you know, they'll accept it.
I think in defence of referees, to finish this segment, I'm going to move back to the football in a minute, but that's a two-way street. So if players are abusing you, you're far less likely to engage in a discussion with them. So maybe when they're used to a certain style of approach, they give a certain style of response, and that works on both sides. So
listen, if Stephanie swore at the referee, maybe she deserved the red card. We don't know what was actually said, so we can't.
Well, I know she didn't swear at the referee. I know it was something directed at a player, and it was something that we all say in our daily thing, but the referee just didn't like it and sent her off. And so I do know what it is. I'm just not going to repeat it. But it was, it's just one of those things where you kind of feel like a word in the player's ear, or maybe in both players' ears, might have been a better solution than maybe a red card in that situation. Anyway, the game itself, disappointing for both. Where do both go from here? Wexford and Peamount, it's kind of their league challenge. Unless Shelbourne make a huge boo-boo between now and the end of the season, it's very hard to see anyone else taking the title. I hate
this. I hate to say this, because I was going to keep it later on in the podcast. But if Athlone Town win against Wexford on Saturday, Athlone Town goes second. Yeah. You know, and that's the sort of thing we're looking at. But the thing for me is, in terms of the league table, is who do you see Shelbourne, you know, realistically dropping points against, in terms of, because there's been times in recent weeks where they haven't been at their best. Like, you'll talk about Shells in a minute, and they still get a result. So whereas Wexford and Peamount sort of struggling, where, you know, is it going to be, you hate that I'd say that it could potentially be this, but is it going to be a case that Shelbourne just continue to break that gap and make it bigger and bigger, and Peamount and Wexford potentially fall back into the cluster?
Well, I'm glad you said fall back, because for me, I don't think Shells are better than they were last year. In fact, I'd argue they're probably a lower level than they were performing at. They were very impressive in the first half of last season. And for me, I just think that the teams that were around them, and I spoke about Wexford at the start of the year, and they've dropped a little bit. They've dropped a little bit back. Peamount have dropped a little bit back. They've lost players to various different codes, different leagues, the WSL and even other teams within the league. But I think Athlone better than they were last year? Maybe a touch, but they're not substantially better than they were last year. And yet, as you said, they could be second in the table in a couple of days' time. So I think it's very much a case of the standard across the board has dropped a little. And I think I probably get myself in a world of pain for saying that, but I think ultimately that's where we are, is that clubs need to look at themselves and look at, are they doing everything they can do? We saw some talk coming out of Cork earlier this season about not having training grounds. That's not good enough at this level. People need to be setting the bar where the men are or higher. So if the men have X facilities available, then the women's side of the house need to make sure that they have their house in order. Sometimes that's not possible in certain circumstances with clubs. I know there's politics involved in terms of who gets access to what, but so you see the clubs who have pushed the women to an equal footing are the clubs that are performing. And the three clubs that I can see looking in from the outside, Treaty is a different case, we'll talk about them in a second, but Shells, Sligo Rovers and Athlone are the three who are arguably, Shells are top of the league by a landslide at the moment. Athlone and Sligo outperforming all expectations pre-season. Are they the ones that get treated 50-50 by the clubs? Yeah, they are. And for me, that's kind of the ones where clubs that want to take this seriously, women's football, need to really invest the time, invest the energy, invest the attention, but also some of the financial resources. You don't need to pay players. The girls aren't really even looking for that. Some are, yes, but I think the vast majority, they just want to feel like they've got the same pitch, the same dressing room, the same gear, the same footballs, the same respect, the same social media coverage. And I think that clubs are falling short on that.
Can I ask a question to you on that, Breifne? It's just based around Shelbourne. So we look at Shelbourne at the moment. Saoirse Noonan is due to go to Durham in the summer. Jess Sue is due to go as well. Could potentially be one or two. I know there's talk that Gloria Douglas is only there till the summer. So like for them, while they're setting the pace now, could potentially lose 3-4 players in the summer, which then brings it back to them. So when we're talking about the likes of Peamount, is it fair to say that the likes of Peamount and Wexford, they just need to get to that summer break to where they can reassess to how far the damage is? Because if Shells lose the likes of Jess Sue, Saoirse, because Saoirse scored goals for fun the last couple of weeks, it really brings them back even closer to the pack.
Yeah, but I don't think Shells have a problem. Their squad is just strong enough at the moment. I don't think the others have the strength and depth past the 11 on the pitch or past maybe 12 or 13. I think Shells have a solid 16, 17, 18, and I think they'll make it through, save a couple of suspensions or injuries later on. But who knows? I think that's why Peamount have dropped off, is that in the last 12 to 18 months, they've probably lost 4 or 5 first-team regulars. And no team can afford to lose that. The biggest thing, and we'll talk about it, not today, but we'll talk about it some other time, is that the fact that they've got €0 compensation for developing all of these players and getting them to the professional game. And I think that's something FIFA, UEFA, the FAI and the clubs are going to have to talk about doing. Is it time we move to semi-pro just to tie girls into part-time contracts so there's some level of compensation? I think possibly. Does that have a knock-on effect with compensation to the junior game, girls coming up from all over the country and joining the likes of Shells or Peamount at 16, 17, 18? Maybe. And can clubs afford that? Probably not. So it's all a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Who's going to give in first? Can we get some of the money that's in the WSL heading towards our clubs that we can regrow these players? Because we can. We have the talent coming through. You only have to look at the 17s and 19s leagues and the players coming through in the last couple of years, the likes of Abby Larkin, the likes of Jess Zhu, the likes of Emily Corbett, Jess Slattery. Like, these players are coming through all over the place. But it is what it is. Anyway, we're getting distracted. Let's get on with the actual sport over the weekend. And, of course, plenty of games. Let's move west. 2 Athlone girls, more or less. Sinead Taylor and Chloe Singleton, midway between Dublin and Galway. And they split the fare between them on Saturday afternoon. Galway won, Bows won, both of the girls on the scoreline. They'll be quite happy with that. But as it is at the moment, neither team, again, quite happy with it. There's very little to separate those two sides in the middle of the table.
I had a chat with someone on the Bows camp actually on Saturday after the game. I just sent a text message off saying we're happy with the result, and they were like, "Yeah, Galway are a good side." Like, you only have to look the fact that Galway won 3 of their previous 4 games before they went into that game with Bows, and they beat Bows 3-0 when the sides played in Dalymount only a couple of weeks previously. So for Bows to go away from home, especially with that sort of result, with that sort of game, is a good result. And thankfully, Kira Marr's injury didn't seem too bad. She was able to play. But then you look at the potential. There's potential that they could have the likes of Chloe Darby, even Katie Bird is back at the weekend. So that's 2 more injuries coming off the injury bed, and that'll help them as well even more. But I think for them, they'd have been very happy going down there getting a point. It's a good reaction to the Shelbourne loss. Shania Taylor, she's been a little bit frustrated at times in games. You can see it where she hasn't had the success she maybe wanted. But the one thing I did say about her when she joined Bowes is she's somebody who knows where the net is, and that's something that's big for them. And Chloe Singleton on the other side though for Galway, as you say on the score sheet, she's somebody who probably still runs a little bit under the radar. She's had some good impacts on certain times, but probably doesn't get the full credit maybe that she should get. She's a smashing young footballer.
Absolutely, and I think for me, looking at the game, Sinead Taylor in particular, she's lost that yard of speed. She's not the most mobile of forwards, so to see her through ball and running in behind the defender and sticking the ball in the back of the net, it wasn't something in the last 12 yards of the field. She just took it really, really well, and I was delighted to see that for her. Really, really nice way to open your account on the day. Of course, Chloe Singleton then wrapped it up a draw before half-time, and no real major events happened in the second half. But Galway, in terms of what they're offering this year, they've been hot and cold. They've been really good some weeks, and then other weeks just maybe not quite at the races. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fair. It's a fair point. I think realistically, you look at them. We probably all had high expectations, as considering what the under-19s have done in previous seasons, and then what they've done against Peamount on the last day of the season. I remember actually talking to Joey Malone before the cup final, and he was telling me he was speaking to Stephen Lally, and like the under-19s that time when they beat Peamount had a cup final the next day, but he still put out the players in the league to respect the National League, and they just have that thing about them that they're going to click at some stage. They're probably missing one or two players just from being, real up there, but they're developing players at a massive rate of knots. They're getting these good youngsters coming through. The problem is with the National League is it's trying to blend these younger players in now, because as things are getting more competitive, it's tougher to bring some of the younger players in. Maybe they have to wait an extra year to maybe where they would have had to do a couple of years ago, because you already have some of the players, you've already got your Trace, Levy's, your Shauna Brennan's, who are about only, I think 18 each, just going 19, if even, so you have them sort of players in there. And it's hard to just try to put too much youth. I think in terms of a Galway focus, they're probably going to have to focus on youth for the next couple of years. But the good thing is when there's a good core nucleus there, it definitely helps to help with the growth.
Yeah, they all grow together. So in 3 or 4 years' time, you have a really good, solid, older squad. In terms of the game, Shell's big win against DLR, it almost seemed at times like they wanted to just walk the ball into the back of the net. I think all their goals came from inside the 6-yard box, tap-ins, purely because of the quality of the build-up play. But Shells just seemed like they were toying with DLR at times. Does that kind of reinforce how big that gap is between that, say, first and maybe fourth, fifth spot?
For me, like when I walked to Talk Park on Saturday and I was talking to people, the first thing I said to a couple of people is that, maybe Shells want to give them a hiding for the fact that the loss, it's the only loss the Shells have had. Sloppy a bit in the first half. Like you look at the first goal, the Saoirse goal, it came from a mistake where Jess Lawton tried to clear the ball, but she just kicked it up in the air, and then it was a tap in there from there. But for me, I think Noelle Murray's got a run for the third goal, where she runs down the sideline and down the byline, and she just cuts past a couple before putting it across to Jessie. I think Eamon Deasy's a little bit unlucky. If I'm looking at that game, to be honest with you, Breifne, I'm probably going to have to say that bringing on Abby Larkin at half time was the moment for Noel King, because she was sensational in the second half, got involved early, even when she was shooting from distance. Maybe it wasn't as good as a shot as she wanted. Noel was constantly encouraging her, constantly telling her, listen, come on, keep going. And I think for me, I would have said she was probably the player of the match, considering she only played 45 minutes, but she was that electric, that spark that they needed to help unlock a stubborn DLR Waves defence. But don't get me wrong, DLR Waves had chances. First half, Kate Mooney forced a good save from Amanda Budden, but for the Shells defence, it's 1 goal now in 11 games, and I think that's probably what's doing it for them. They're not necessarily the top scorers in the league, but defensive wise, they're not conceding, and they're putting other teams under pressure, and that's where they're maybe making them cave.
Just to clarify, before we get any emails in or tweets, 1 goal conceded in 11 games. Seriously impressive defence from Shells this year. Second last game of the weekend was, of course, Treaty and Athlone. I think based on form, we all kind of knew how this was going to go, but another fine performance, 2 penalties from Emily Corbett, and just a really, really solid performance from Athlone. Muireann Devaney maybe a little bit lucky with her effort from distance, just kind of creeping into the bottom corner. But Athlone, six wins on the bounce. Sounds impressive, but I suppose, have they been lucky in maybe how those fixtures have fallen a little bit?
I can't believe you didn't even mention the fact that Jessica Hennessy's goal. I think that was the pick of the
It,
goals for me.
it was a cracking goal, but I suppose just I was picking. I know
In
I'm from Leitrim. We don't have that many wins. Muireann Devaney scores a goal in the Women's National League. I'm going to talk about it.
Like, you know, the funny thing is, though, I actually, just before I give you my comment on that, I actually thought that Sligo would have made a massive play for Muireann Devaney, because obviously
She was signed before Sligo even got into the league, as was Roisin Malloy, to be fair.
So watch this space of Sligo making aggressive play. But in fact, is it fair to say fixtures have fallen Athlone's way? Maybe a little bit, but then again, you have to look at the fact that they beat Peamount. Like, the biggest thing for me is when everybody asks, you know, when you talk about Athlone beating Peamount, a lot of people, the first question I got off people was it on the Astro in Athlone? You know, because people are thinking, is that a little bit of a leveler? But, you know, then you look at it's on the road in Peamount. I think, you know, Treaty, as we said, it's going to be a tough season for them. You know, a lot of younger players there, but even for them just to get on the score sheet, you know, for them it's a constant build and block. You know, they're still getting some good results underage as well, which helps. But for them, it's going to be a long season. In terms of Athlone, you know, I think they just deserve their form, because, you know, they haven't, some of the games they haven't just gone and struggled over the line as well, which is the important thing. You know, they've put in some very good displays and looked as though they could do more damage to people. And, you know, it's great to see. I think for me, and I said this last season, I think for the likes of the National League to be really, really good, we need a strong Midlands, we need a strong Dundalk Louth, we need someone a strong Cork Kerry area. You know, we need strong teams outside the capital, instead of everything just being Dublin based. Because if it's everything's going to be Dublin based, you might as well just pack up and say, listen, let's just have another Dublin Women's Soccer League, because that's not what we want. We want a strong round the country. We want everybody to be able to, you know, I want to be able to turn on the telly or turn on the game and be like, I don't know who's going to win here. And I think that's important for the growth of the Women's National League, that we continue to see the likes of Athlone make strides. I know there is talk, I was going to save it for later, but I might as well say it now, but there's talk that with Sligo Shamrock Rovers, announcing Jason Carey as their Women's Director of Football. Their intention is to apply for a Women's National League licence for 2023. They've publicly stated that over the weekend as well. So, you know, the league is probably, we need to be careful the league doesn't become too Dublin dominant in terms of teams. You know, I'm sort of hoping that if they are to allow us Shamrock Rovers in, that we maybe get another country team as well, just to add a bit to the balance. But in terms of Athlone, no, everything's going good there, and Tommy, you will be very happy.
I meant just on the Shamrock Rovers thing, I think that gene pool, the geographical gene pool for Shamrock Rovers, I can't see Shamrock Rovers entering the league with the facilities and the profile they have, and it not damaging Peamount in a major way. And I think I would love to see a collaboration between those two clubs.
Can I flip it?
Go on.
Can I flip it? Does it damage DLR as well? Because there's no other team in that. Because they're only literally 20 minutes from DLR.
I think the profile of Shamrock Rovers at the moment, particularly with they're in the men's game, will damage everybody in the Dublin area. I think Shells will probably cope, but I think the others will all struggle. And I say that, apologies to everyone I get on with up there, but I think if you're realistic about what's going to happen over the next 4 to 5 years if Shamrock Rovers come in, with everything I talked about, facilities, the coaching staff that's there, just the talent of the coaching pool that's in that club, with really good international experienced coaches, and the facilities and the resources, the financial resources, would put everything else to shame. And I think that's going to be a big thing. If Shamrock Rovers come in a meaningful way, I can see them being the dominant side in Dublin inside 3 seasons, if not sooner. But anyway, we do have one other game to talk about before we finish up, and that, of course, is the meeting in the Showgrounds. It's the game I was at between Sligo Rovers and Cork. Of course, well talked about in the first round of games when Sligo Rovers secured their first goal and their first victory down in Turner's Cross. They proved on Saturday that it wasn't a flash in the pan. 2-0 winners. A fantastic goal from Emma Doherty in the first minute of the game, and then a late strike from that provider. Provider turned goal scorer, Gemma McGuinness, who of course was on the show with us last week. We seem to have that little magic touch on the show this week, which I don't know. People don't want to be the first to break the curse with no live guests. we will be talking to both Steve Feeney and Jess Garrigan. Not Jess Garrigan. Some apologies, Jess Lawton. I think I've put her name in wrong in the system, but. Now they look at it, but we would speak to her after the game at the weekend. But first of all, your thoughts on that? We might spend a little bit of time on Sligo and Cork because they're both that same gene pool in the middle to lower reaches of the table. But Cork are probably where we would have expected Sligo to be, and vice versa going into the season. Your thoughts on the game and where they both are this season?
To be honest with you, I'll go with the thoughts in the season first, because I probably thought that I did think that Cork would struggle this year. You know, it's just been a tough couple of years. The amount of players that they have lost, you know, it's hard to make up for that. You can't continue to lose player after player after player going either going abroad, or then you lose Saoirse to Shelbourne, Amanda Budden obviously going to Galway and then making the move to Shelbourne. So it's tough for them. You know, you can only develop so many youngsters, and it's hard to continue to keep trying to blend them in. Ronan Collins, Paul Farrell, you know, they've all done massive work down there. And for them to see players just leave the way they have, it sort of stems back into, I think it's going to continue to happen in Cork until we have that conversation about what happens next with the league, how the league settles down in terms of potential semi-pro and stuff like that. I think that's always going to impact the likes of Cork, because players are just attracted to that lifestyle, that opportunity to go abroad and say, I was a scholarship student in America. You know, they're not all, the problem is they're not all going for top colleges, which is the frustrating thing. Some of them are going for junior colleges, but it's just a scholarship, it's just the opportunity, and that's what frustrates us. But in terms of Sligo, when I saw Sligo against Peamount the opening day of the season, so I thought, okay, it's going to take a bit of time. It's going to take some more working to get there. Saw them against DLR Waves on LOI TV, and I was thinking, okay, progress again. Then watched them live against Shelbourne and Talca Park, and I was thinking, ooh, some things are impressing me here. You know, they were doing things that were sort of, I wasn't expecting at that sort of stage from them. And I just think they've just continued to step on and continue to improve. The biggest thing you can see, and Gemma sort of told us last week, is there's a massive collectiveness amongst them. You can see that from the players and even watching them and things like that. So they're getting a good just reward for the team cohesion. I thought it'd be a bit tougher for them coming into the league. I thought they'd struggle a little bit more, but they haven't, and it's fair due to the coaching staff, the players, because they put in a lot of hard work. In terms of the game itself, another good win for Sligo. My only question is, are they maybe a little bit reliant? This is the same question that would have been asked about Athlone. Are they a little bit more too reliant on Emma Doherty for the goals? You know,
I think they might be. That's a question I put to Steve Feeney after the game on Saturday. Let's hear what he had to say. Oh, if I could operate my computer pretty good. Let's hear what he had to say. Steve Feeney, thoughts on today's game?
Yeah, a good game, good performance from us. Second half, real disciplined kind of defensive performance. Cork are very good with the ball, like, you know, and they knock it around really well and have good movement off the ball, so we knew it was going to be hard. And down in Cork, actually, in the second game of the season, or the third game of the season, they really moved it well against us and caused us a lot of problems. So we were aware of that, and I thought today we were a bit more defensively organised and made it harder for them, and they didn't create as many kind of clear-cut chances as they would have down in Cork. And we still had a threat then going forward. You know, we probably started the game really well going forward, and as the game went on, and especially in the second half, we probably played a little bit too deep, but we still had that threat going forward on the counter-attack, and, you know, obviously that's where our second goal came from.
You talked about the great start, not a bad way to start, 40 seconds in maybe. Great ball in from Gemma, finds the head of Emma, and just end back of the net. There's never really any doubt in your mind when a player that quality has that opportunity.
That's it, like, you know, Emma's, I think that's her fourth or fifth already, like, you know, for an 18-year-old playing in the league for the first time. Like, it shows you, you know, it speaks more than I can say about her. But even Gemma just coming inside, that creativity and great ball into the box, and as you said, like, a great start, like, you know, that early in the game, and it just gave us that confidence and kind of something to build on and keep pushing forward.
So Cork looked like they grew into it. Maybe in the early stages of the second half, they looked like they were probably going to be the more likely to score, and to catch them on the break then at the end, maybe slightly against the run of play, but just to kind of seal that victory and reinforce the fact that the result in Turner's Cross wasn't a fluke, that you're you're rightly where you are in the table.
Yeah, no, definitely Cork. Like, you know, as I said, they've a very good side there. Some lovely players, like, and they knocked around well, and they definitely had the kind of share there in the second half of possession. But I suppose that was kind of us. We were kind of been compact and trying to be hard to play through, and when we wanted them, we tried to break. And obviously with the players we have up the pitch, like, we have a lot of pace and a lot of guile. And thankfully, with a few minutes to go, Gemma scored the second one just to make it that little bit easier. But even saying that, Cork kept going as well. Like, you know, they nearly scored at the very end, you know, to make it 2-1. So we're delighted to get 3 points, and any point we get, we're delighted with. But as you said, like, it kind of, I suppose, it gives us that confidence that, you know, we're good enough to be picking up points in the league and challenging teams.
We've had some of the girls from the club on the podcast over the last 10 or 11 weeks. First time we've had a chance really to pick your brain. What's your thoughts on the season so far? You must be happy. 12 points from 11 games. You'd have taken that, I think, at the start of the season.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and I suppose at the start, yeah, we would have snapped, you know, anyone's hand off for it. And I suppose as it's gone on and we got the points, obviously, against Cork and Treaty, we've probably started to kind of push it a wee bit more and try and, you know, raise expectations. And then obviously we got the points for the Peamount game. But, you know, our kind of challenge for the second round of games was to make sure that we were competitive in every game and that we weren't conceding like as soft a goals as we did in round one. I think today kind of shows that, you know, the girls are definitely on for that challenge. Like, and we have a threat going forward, which is great. You know, we've scored a few goals in the league. So I think week by week, girls are becoming more confident, and we're kind of, I suppose, finding our feet in the league. But we're under no illusions. You know, like, we could, if we don't turn up every week, you know, we could easily take a hiding. Like, so it's important that we make sure that every week we're ready to rock, and, you know, we're giving a performance every week.
How important is that clean sheet play?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, it was one of the targets or goals we set for the second round of the games, was to try and get our first clean sheet. Like, you know, and I think you could see there in the last kind of 10 or 15 minutes, you know, girls getting blocking crosses and shots and stuff, how much they really wanted it. And special mention to Amy Manning goals, like, you know, 18 and has come in for Kristen, obviously the last few games since Kristen's injury. And I thought she was just so comfortable, you know, coming for crosses and, you know, taking shots that were coming in at her cleanly, and just gave us a kind of a confident base to have behind us there.
I suppose finally then, you talked to a couple of young players. Pixie O'Hara has probably been my highlight of the league so far in terms of youngsters coming through and really impressing and growing into the standard of the league. How important is it to see youngsters like that from the area coming through and being part of a successful team?
Yeah, it's great to see, like, you know, and I suppose, like, from a local kind of point of view, it brings people to the games, obviously, because their family and friends are going to take an interest when they're doing well. But Pixie's been excellent since she came into the team. Well, she's been excellent since the start of the season, but since she's come into the team.
Is it Pixie or Kerry?
It's Curry is her name, but she goes by Pixie. And when I asked her at the start of the year, she told me to call her Pixie. So, but yeah, no, like, we've a few, you know, girls coming through. Like, you know, Sarah Kiernan came into the team there for a few weeks and done really well, and has come on the last couple of games. Jessica Casey coming on there again is another under 17 like Pixie, you know, so came on right back, position she doesn't play, like, and, you know, looked right at home, done really well. So there's some really good young players coming through the club, and it's brilliant to see.
Well done today.
Thanks, man.
Of course, Steve Feeney there. We might just jump straight into Jess Lawton's chat if you want, Darren. We can come back and have a chat about the two and wrap up the fixture.
Sounds good.
Bear with me again. The joys of live broadcast here. We'll have a chat to Jess here when I spoke to her after their defeat on Saturday afternoon in the Showgrounds. Jess, thoughts after today's game?
Look, it was disappointing. I think disappointing performance. We expect to play better. I think we didn't get down the ball and play the way that we can. Look, it was a long trip, but we can't use that as an excuse either. We need to do things better. Good performance last week, and it's kind of back to the drawing board to make sure that we get a good weekend in training. But we need to learn from this. The girls have been great, to be fair. And look, they go in and they're disappointed as all of we are. But there's a lot in them, and we know what they can do. So onwards and upwards, but a lot of work to be done over the next couple of weeks.
So in terms of your own role over the last 10 days, it's changed dramatically. How much notice did you get about this? Were you aware this might happen, or was it something that was kind of thrown at you at the last minute?
No, it was kind of just thrown at me. And look, that's the world of football. I'm lucky enough to be around the club. I know the girls. I know all the players inside out, albeit in a different role. But yeah, no, look, it's one thing. We have to look after the club and see what's best going forward as well. So I mean, until such time as they find a full-time manager, and that's fine. That's what we'll do. And look, we're not going to sit here and expect to just go out and perform. We will make changes over that time frame, be it that they'll be in next week or in a couple of weeks' time. We're not too sure yet, but it's all about making sure it's the right person.
In terms of the game today, you've set the team up, you've given them instructions, and then 40 seconds in, you find yourself down to a pretty decent goal. To be fair, it's one of the best ones in the league so far this year in terms of the build-up. How do how do you react to that?
That's it. Like, look, it's a learning curve. You have to be able to react. That's football. It can happen at any stage. And, everyone says you concede early, and that's the joys of the game. You can concede at any time. So it's all about resetting and restarting again. And to be fair, I think we refocused quite well. And we did get back into the game. We didn't have clean enough passages of play. We needed to secure the ball a little bit more. But I actually thought our reaction to the goal going in, we didn't just drop our heads. We did try and get out again. It's unfortunate when it's that early. It doesn't give you time to settle in, but that's the joys of it. As I say, I thought they reset quite well. I think would have been something maybe in the past that we wouldn't have reset from quick. So look, that is a positive. It was a good goal, as you said. We need to be a little bit more in tune with it, but no, overall, I think it was early on in the game. It hindered us, of course, but I thought we reset quite well after it.
Very important moment, a couple of minutes later, and Maria Sullivan pulled off a fantastic save, I think, from Lauren Bowles.
Yeah.
Does that build that confidence? Of course, player with her experience coming back into the team, Zara Foley as well, coming back from the States. How much of an impact do they're like a new signing?
Yeah, no, look, they bring a lot of experience and a lot of leadership qualities with them as well. I mean, Maria was the captain before she left, so she's naturally going to have that leadership quality in her too. I think it was a big save. It's a big moment as well in a game, especially when you can start getting them going again, where you realise, look, we have to defend here and we have to get in shape, and we still have brilliant moments in us. So no, I think it was a big save, and it allowed us to settle that a little bit more as well.
You seem to be having a bit of a love-hate relationship with the linesman on the far side. Some of the decisions, I won't ask you to put yourself in trouble, but there was definitely some question marks over a couple of decisions in both halves. Your thoughts on, I suppose, on how you cope with those when those decisions don't go your way?
Yeah, look, I think that's for me to be concerned about, not the players. That's a big thing. That's what I'll say to them. I'll deal with the stuff off the pitch. You don't need to worry about it too much. Look, that's the way football goes, but you can't leave it to decisions either. You need to make sure you're doing your job on the day as well. So yeah, look, decisions went against us, but decisions go against every team at some stage or another. You have to be able to deal with them and move forward.
In terms of, I suppose, where you go from here, obviously you've kind of indicated maybe that are you interested in the full-time job? Is that a thought, or is it something you're just here to
No, I think that's something in the future. Not for me at the moment. Yeah, that's not to say, look, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know who's coming in, and I can say that from the bottom of my heart. But for the time that I'm here, I'll give it 110%. That's with anything that I do, and we'll sort the problems that we can sort. We'll play good football. We'll get shape. We'll move the ball quickly, and we'll go in and work on everything this week as well. But as regards the future, that's in the club's hands going forward.
In the more immediate future, next week, obviously back in action again. What do you change going into next week's game?
I think a lot of things prep wise, we just need to make sure that we're on point for it. I think another thing for us is just to make sure that we're looking after the ball that little bit more, and having that confidence as well, that when things go wrong, we have to get up and go again. And I think it was something we showed good character in last week, so we do know that it's in us. But it's to get consistent across that. So it's probably consistency in performance that we need to start working on.
All right, okay.
Thank you.
Now, of course, Jess Lawton there speaking to me after the game on Saturday afternoon in the Showgrounds. She was very non-committal on whether she wanted the job or not. Aaron, your thoughts?
I'm not sure the timing is right for her. She seemed to be working her way. She got I think she initially had one of the underage teams and then was given the second one in Cork. I think she knows it's a big step, it's a big commitment, and there's a lot in it for her. There's no doubt in my mind that we will potentially see Jess managing in the National League. I think she's a good coach. She's a good communicator. I think we will see that. Whether it happens now or not, it's a lot of questions there. But my only concern, though, Breifne, is who do they bring in? Sarah Healy, who's been involved with previous teams, that says she hasn't applied for. So who do they bring in? Who do they get in? Is the question. There's not a lot of managers down that sort of area who potentially have the National League experience. Is it going to be a case they're going to have to look at somebody who maybe hasn't been involved before? Do they potentially look at someone like a Frank Callagher potentially going back for a second spell to try and stabilise things? A lot of questions have to be answered. I saw the talk we might have got a little bit more of an insight from the club this week, but we haven't yet. And the problem is they have a couple of games left just before the international break, so maybe they won't make that decision until the break happens. Then they can properly reassess things. Where I think there's no games for I think it's 3 weeks from the 11th onwards. There's no games on until the 4th of July. So gives them a lot of time then if they can just get justice to maybe stabilise the ship for the moment. but you can hear from her she wasn't happy with certain aspects of the performance last week. What did you make of the performance? Because obviously you were in the showgrounds. What did you make of the Cork performance?
Honestly, and I'm not going to win too many friends with this one either. I'm going to alienate a lot of people this week. I thought there were two relatively poor sides. And there was a moment of magic in the first minute. Gemma McGuinness made a bit of space for herself. Fantastic cross, pinpoint accurate. Emma Doherty, what a finish. Keeper could have done better. Although Maria Sullivan definitely was probably Cork's best player on the day. But I think she'd be disappointed that she was caught cold so early on. It was right down at her feet, but it wasn't. It wasn't in the corner. In the middle of a game, you'd expect to save that early. She just got caught cold. And Sligo, I won't take anything away from that. It was a good finish. It was a great play. They get themselves a really good start. And Cork never really got back into it. Could have been two a few minutes later. I think I said it was Lauren Bowles in the conversation, but I think it might have been Fiona Doherty. I'm not sure who broke through, but Maria Sullivan made 2 point-blank saves in the game that kept her side in it. And then at the very end, it was a great piece of play from, I think, Lauren Kelly just broke, and she just put a ball in from McGuinness, and McGuinness just latched onto it. There was no need to ask her twice. She just stroked it into the corner past O'Sullivan, who'd come out of her box. If she'd saved it, it would have been a red card anyway. So she probably had she's probably lucky she didn't make the save. But at the same time, Sligo, well worth the win. But they're both probably in the position that they should be in, if that makes sense in terms of points in the league table at the moment. Sligo marginally the better of the sides, definitely worth their win. Although saying that, Cork definitely had a couple of chances in that second half where they could have equalised. Had they done so, I wouldn't have said a draw was unfair either on either team. But Sligo just marginally the better side. Cork, they have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of players. Like Eva Mangan is a very impressive player, and I really like the way she gets on the ball. She's looking for it all the time. Kelly Leahy was all right in the middle alongside her. Becky Casson, of course, doesn't need any discussion. She's obviously one of the top players in the league. There was a few other players. Zara Foley, I thought, was very good on the right wing. She really offered an outlet every time, and Mangan used to get her head up and just get the ball out to Zara Foley, and I thought they got a lot of joy down that right hand side. Very unlucky not to score once or twice from there as well. But listen, I don't think Cork can have too many complaints. There was a few question marks over referee or linesman's decisions in the second half. I think the ones that they protested the most for were probably the ones that they genuinely weren't on side for. They had a couple earlier on, but the later ones, they were definitely well offside. But do you know what? It is what it is. Cork have never really managed to put together a title winning or title competing side in 10, 12 years in the league. And really, there should be a club the size of what they are, with no club between Wexford, Athlone and Limerick, a population of maybe 700,000, 800,000 people in that population centre. They really should be offering more than they are at the moment. And I don't know what steps are required to make that happen. Maybe it's back to the idea of the prioritisation within the club and the politics within the club to see if that happens. But that's not a decision you're making.
I'll be calling that off your Breifne, right? They're bringing through Eve Mangan, Laura Shine, Lauren Igbaluda, who's now gone to the States. The amount of players they brought through, Ava O'Mahony, they've all come through, played underage for the club and then come through. So, but they're not even winning at underage stuff. You know, that's the concerning thing, is that at least we know with the likes of Galway. Galway are winning and competing at underage stuff. Shamrock Rovers have won an underage league with the likes of Jessie Stapleton a couple of years ago. But Cork haven't once are struggling to win silver at underage, which doesn't make it, you know, it doesn't bode well for the future. And I think priorities definitely need to be, something needs to change in order for them to have a refocus. I
don't necessarily believe winning a title at underage is the best priority for a club either. I'd be more in terms of player development and progressing players through. Like, I was involved in the early days in Sligo. We had a very solid side that represented most of North Connacht, and the 7 or 8 of those players, maybe 9 or 10 of those players, playing in the Women's National League this year. So out of a squad of 18 or 20 girls, there are 10 or 11 actively playing week in, week out with 4 clubs in the league. Sligo, Galway, Athlone and Shells have a player she's only played a couple of minutes, but she has played a few minutes for Shells, Kate O'Dowd. So there are players, and clubs have other priorities other than winning a title. I would rather see half a dozen players from a certain age group coming through and playing senior football than maybe winning a title at under 17, under 19. So I wouldn't put it all down to underage titles, but I do take your point.
I get where you're coming from, because it's just, for me, you know, you look at the underage structures when when they're coming through, you see the likes of players, someone who I mentioned there, have come through and they look good in the National League. But, sometimes if you don't have, it can also be a case when a club like that, if they don't bring a winning mentality, they're not used to always winning and being successful. It can be hard as well to even sometimes change cultures and change things like that. Because the problem is, I think for Cork, and you rightly said it, for a long time, Cork were nearly the whipping team. 1 win in a year, two wins in one season, where the Douglas Hall and Wilton divide, where the teams were playing, the number of players were playing in the National League. And I think when Niall O'Regan come in and he steadied that ship, he got the Douglas Hall and Wilton players back on side. We sort of thought we'd see a massive changing of the guard in Cork, but it hasn't come, unfortunately. It's disappointing.
Hopefully the next phase of the club, whether that's with Jess or with somebody else coming in the next couple of weeks, we'll see upward trajectory on that. But I think it has to come from higher than whoever's in the manager's job. It has to be a want of the club, and if the club are fully behind it, and I'm not saying I have no information to say they're not, but if the club fully back it, I think there's huge potential in Cork. They're probably, Cork and Treaty for me are the two that I would like to see pushing it on in the next couple of years. Let's take a look at the league tables, and then we'll have a look maybe at the fixtures going on. We are running out of time. We like to keep things under the hour here, but let's take a quick look at the league table at the moment. And as you can see, Shell's there, a comfortable 7-point lead at the top of the table, but there's a nice clump of teams there from Wexford on 23 points, right down to DLR in 6th, who really are putting their hands up to say we're here, we're in the hunt for that second place position at least. Athlone, of course, as you mentioned, the surprise package to some extent in that group, but they are there by merit. And then the other teams in the group, we talked about Sligo, Cork, Bows in the middle of that mix, while Treaty currently pointless in what has been a disappointing season for them. As we look our attention towards the statistics, top scorers in the league at the moment, Emily Corbett, 2 from her at the weekend, sees her go to the top of the table, 10 goals in her 11 appearances. But I think 8 of the top 10 were on the score sheet this week. Emily Corbett, Elle Malloy, Anya Gorman, Kylie Murphy, Stephanie Roach was the only one not to score. She unfortunately saw red for her sins this week. Sinead Taylor, Sive Doyle and Emma Doherty all on the score sheet. I think a couple more just another level down got their second or third goal of the season as well. And finally, if we take a look at the clean sheets, it's all about Shells at the moment. 8 clean sheets for Amanda Budden in her 9 appearances. Amanda McQuillan, she's played 2.5 games as well. She's kept clean sheets in all of those. Just 1 goal conceded so far. No doubt about who is top between the sticks this year. Eve Badana, Niamh Coombs, Maeve Williams, and a couple of others on 2 or on 3 there. Abigail Monahan in there with 3 clean sheets for her sake this year as well. So it's been a decent year for the goal scorers. We're seeing a lot more. We're not seeing in the early stages of the league, I suppose you'd be well familiar, Aaron, of seeing girls scoring 30, 40 goals or 20, maybe high 20s in 15, 16 games. That we're seeing less and less of that. We're now seeing maybe a goal a game or 0.8 of a goal a game, 0.9 of a goal a game for the top strikers in the league. It's becoming a bit more level. Yeah,
and it's becoming a bigger variety as well, because you look at the last couple of years, you wouldn't have seen the likes of an Emily Corbett. You'd have seen Anya Gorman, Eleanor Ryan Doyle, whoever was a Shelbourne at the time, maybe Leanne Kieran at that stage. You'd always see a Shelbourne player up there. You'd see a Wexford player when the likes of Rihanna Jarrett was there, when Claire Warren was playing front. You'd always see one of them, but you'd never see the likes of an Athlone player there. You'd never see others. And it's great to see the more, it's great to see more getting an opportunity and more scoring goals, because it makes it more competitive if other teams are scoring goals. Because the years gone by, you may have looked at Athlone, maybe struggled to score against a Peamount, struggled to score against a Wexford, struggled to score against Shells, may have got all their goals against the teams who were in and around them. Where now teams are actually scoring goals against these other sides. And I think this weekend's round of fixtures, there's some absolute cracking ties where I think we could get some good goal scorers out of them this weekend.
Funny you should say that. Let me just get it scrolling here 1 second. I hit the wrong option, but the funny you should say that, because the fixtures this weekend, of course, Galway make the journey to Belfield to play DLR Waves, while Treaty United and Sligo meet in the Markets Field. Cork City host Shells, both of those games at 5 p.m, while Bows and Peamount in a Dublin derby, and then
just be aware, Shelbourne and Cork is actually at 12 o'clock.
Okay, apologies.
It's been brought forward at 12 o'clock. As far as I know, the Shells want to get back from the Champions League final.
our gremlins hadn't quite got the better of that one. But let's talk about that for a second. First of all, let's talk about the fixtures before we talk about the Champions League final. Who do you think is the title round? What game will you be watching this weekend?
I actually I have other commitments on this weekend. Unfortunately, will see me not, but I'll be catching up on them. And the one I probably want to catch up on is two in particular. DLR and Galway is probably the one for me, just because they're so close. There was not a lot between them when they played in Eamon Deasy Park as well. So that was the night Savannah McCarthy actually got injured. I think it finished 1-0. And the other one that really intrigues me is probably Wexford and Athlone, because can the Wexford try and keep going? The only team to take points off Athlone away from home is Bows, and it was there. And I wouldn't even call it a football match. It was, to be honest with you, Breifne, if the referee had said, listen,
water polo?
Yeah, but a water polo. We're not playing the pitch. It got to the stage that I think we were 10 minutes before kickoff, and the nets weren't even up. There was an issue with the nets and all. It got to that sort of stage that you were just like, I've just called it off. Let's go home. Let's rearrange this for another night. But the two sides tried their best on the night, but it's the only points that Athlone have dropped away from home. So it makes it interesting with them going on the road. The fact that they've beaten Peamount away, they were unlucky against Wexford at home. They were unlucky against Peamount at home. So that's the one for me. And I think if I was to say to you, Athlone might make a point out of Wexford, I wouldn't be shocked at all if it happens. But then again, I wouldn't be shocked if Wexford go out and put 4 past them.
Yeah, anything can happen in certain areas of the league at the moment. That's it from us for the week. Oh no, we were going to talk about the Champions League quickly, and we are running out of time. We've got 2 minutes on this. But talk to us about the fact that a game's moved so players can watch the Champions League final at the weekend, but yet we had nearly a full set of fixtures last week clashing with the Women's Champions League. Double standard in the league? Yeah,
I don't like that. If you're going to do it for one, you've got to do it for the other. You look how big the Women's Champions League has got right now. You just have to look at the sides that we're in it. It's massive these days. Barcelona and Lyon, 2 absolute icons, and you'd like to see if they're going to do it for one, they do it for the other. I think we shouldn't be. It's the same with Ireland games. Men's Ireland games. No women's games should be anywhere near clashing for the likes of them as well. Saying it because we don't have the women's game. You don't have League of Ireland games. The odd time they can be fixed only when it's not possible to do anything else. So I just think, I'd like to see if you're going to move any men's games to the Champions League, move the women's for the Women's Champions League as well, and show it the respect it deserves, because we're going to have a team who's going to potentially try to qualify for that later on in the year, and I think it deserves more than it got.
Absolutely. Well, listen, that is it from us this week. I agree with you wholeheartedly on your sentiments about showcasing the women's. It's the European, it's the blue ribbon of football in the continent. We should be encouraging every youngster to get out and watch that, and including the players in the league who aspire to be at that level themselves. Aaron, as ever, it's been a pleasure chatting to you for the last hour or so, and I'm sure we'll be chatting to you over the next couple of days and back on the show again next week.
Yeah, have a good one. Cheers.